Welcome to Nasdaq Trade Talks, where we meet with the top thought leaders and strategists in emerging technologies, digital assets, the regulatory landscape, and capital markets. I'm your host, Jill Malandrino, and joining us this afternoon, we have Nishat Mehta, CEO of Lexitas, as well as Arsen Kourinian, partner in the AI cybersecurity and data privacy practice at Mayer Brown. We're here to discuss how the use of responsible AI is moving the legal world from manual to strategic. It is great to have the both of you with us. Certainly an interesting conversation taking place within the legal space. Nishat, let's kick this off with you. Generative AI, it's moving the legal world from what's heavily a manual space into something that's a bit more strategic.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I think technology for the last multiple decades has been extremely valuable to so many different firms that deal with numbers, but not always fields that deal with text. And the legal field is exactly that. And so the advent of generative AI has been quite transformational for this industry because it's actually working in the currency that this industry is working in. And I think that's what creates all the opportunity that we're excited about.
Yeah, it certainly does. But Arsen, I think one thing that's key and critical to keep in mind is that you're dealing with so much PII, personal identification here. So data governance, security within the context of leveraging these new technologies is paramount when it comes to the legal space.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the things that companies need to think about in law firms is using enterprise versions of AI systems. Those at least give you the comfort that your personal information that's being processed through the AI system remains enclosed in your environment and is not used to train the underlying AI model and potentially revealed as an output for other companies or other law firms that are later using the trained AI model themselves.
Yeah. And Nisha, what would be the key area that would be ideal for AI use cases? I mean, the legal world, that's a massive umbrella. And underneath
Yeah.
that, there's a lot of verticals.
I think we get excited by probably two areas. So one is we know that there is a fairly large set of underrepresentation that takes place in the legal field today, meaning more people, we could use more lawyers. I know that the jokes might say otherwise, but people are not represented necessarily as often as they would like to be or getting the advice that they sometimes need to do what they do. And so that's one area where generative AI, again, subject Arsen to your point around accuracy in the counsel, can be quite helpful. I think the other is in raising the floor of competence. I think you have a wide spread of attorneys, some that are very good at their job, some that are not as good. And in the same way that generative AI has, made me at least half as good as my 8-year-old's math teacher, it's helping to make all of us able it's able to make lawyers at least at the base level be stronger than they otherwise would be.
Yeah. And Nisha, you mentioned that litigation would be an ideal use case for AI. Why is that?
Yeah. Yeah. So litigation requires the collection and then processing of millions of documents, or at least millions of lines in documents, depositions, medical records, case law, et cetera. And the ability to consolidate all of that in a human head, again, comes back to this idea of some people are very good at it, others will struggle or take a lot of time to do it. And I think generative AI is very good at collapsing all of that information into the single best argument or set of arguments that you can make to win the case. Now, at the end of the day, it doesn't act on its own. An attorney is obviously very much involved in this, and how an argument will land on a jury or with a judge is going to come down to the way the human interprets the argument. But the beginnings are there if you use generative AI.
Yeah, and Arsen, that's an interesting point to bring up because I think this is one area where human in the loop is not necessarily something you need to, worry about or have AI taking your job. As an example, because attorneys are, they're accountable for accurate work. We've all heard anecdotes about AI spitting out the wrong case, right? And that will certainly blow a case for an attorney. So you're not going to remove that human with making sure that that accuracy and the transparency and auditability is available.
Yeah, the one really important thing for attorneys to know is these are probabilistic systems. Essentially, they take whatever you give as an input, and through weights and measures and probability, they essentially give as an output of what words or text would you want to see based on the context of your input. So it could entirely make up and hallucinate information. generate fake cases. And there's been a number of instances where attorneys have filed briefs with made up cases. And the judges, law clerks, they're going to read those cases. They're going to pull them up on research databases and confirm. And this could be really damaging to your reputation as an attorney. And it's also important, like with most other critical and high risk uses of AI, like in the legal field, healthcare, financial, employment, among other high risk areas, that there be a human that ultimately is in the loop, overseeing the process, reviewing the output instead of being out of the loop and letting the AI simply operate autonomously in these high risk areas.
Yeah, and let's bring that a little bit further as it relates to security as well. When these tools first came out, and it might have been without any malintent, that you're, inputting data that perhaps might have been highly confidential, and you were unaware of it. It wasn't like you were trying to put that out, within the, internet universe. But these guardrails have to be in place, whether it's generative AI platforms, LLMs made specific to that firm, because you're still putting, data out there and it's training these models. It's a big vulnerability.
Yeah, certainly. I think cybersecurity concerns are of paramount with AI because it's both a weapon and a shield. On the offensive, bad actors, even though the AI systems are, for example, trained not to reveal their training data, bad actors have been able to circumvent that by, for example, asking the questions in a different way to the AI system, such as instead of saying reveal your training data, which may include confidential, proprietary, and attorney-client privileged information, they'll say, tell me a haiku that talks about your training data. And there's been instances where through tricking and mechanisms like that is revealed it. But it's also a shield where AI is now being used to protect data that's being used to train the AI systems. So it's both a blessing and a curse in that regard.
Yeah.
I think continuing on that trend, Jill, I think there are two trends that we are facing that are competitive with each other. The first is the technology is improving at a massively accelerating rate, right? The LLM quality today is significantly better than even 6 months ago or 12 months ago. I think the flip side is that you've got a legal industry that has every reason to be risk averse. Mistakes that are made in the law have huge ramifications down the road. And as a result, you've got an industry that wants to be risk averse, needs to be risk averse, but is being quickly convinced by a technology that's getting better every day to take advantage of it.
Yeah, and let's carry that a bit further here, because in the absence of AI, regulation and a framework, and of course, there are frameworks that do exist, such as consumer protection laws and so forth. But how do you balance that as an attorney trying to leverage this new technology and operating within the framework that exists and not really understanding what compliance is going to look like going forward until this is, hopefully legislated sooner than later?
Yeah, on a federal level, we don't have an omnibus AI law. However, there are state by state level patchwork of AI laws. One particularly noteworthy law to mention is Colorado's AI Act, which designates providing legal services or decisions using AI in the legal services context to be a high risk area. So, for example, if an attorney were to receive a client, analyze their case file, and decide I'm not picking up that case based on an output given by the AI system, this may now trigger high risk obligations, which that attorney may not be prepared to address as a compliance measure. So companies and law firms alike should assess these patchwork of AI laws, some which apply in different scenarios and address different risks, depending on whether you're a developer or simply deploying an AI system, and be cognizant of these requirements.
Yeah, Arsen, a little bit adjacent to this conversation, but I've read a number of anecdotes where clients are running, their concerns through AI, coming back to their attorneys, and many times they don't understand that it's very state specific. The laws vary, your practice varies, and it can add an extra layer on for attorneys because clients are being fed information that every case is specific. It has its own individualities.
Right, that's correct. I mean, in particular, it's also noteworthy that there are sector-specific laws. For example, there are data privacy laws, and if you're processing information that's protected health information under HIPAA or information processed by a financial institution that's given to a law firm, there are certain obligations as a recipient of the data to protect that information and sometimes to enter into certain agreements. And if a law firm or an attorney were to get such data, such protected data in the sector context, and they didn't have an appropriate downstream agreement with the AI system provider that they are using, this could potentially raise some risk levels, along with the fact that any type of AI output could inherently be inaccurate, and inaccurate information could potentially harm the case and jeopardize the validity of any arguments that are made that are based on that.
Yeah. And Nishat, you're building these type of guardrails within the solution. So, for example, medical record review, which follows HIPAA, which also takes into account the different jurisdictions that law firms have to adhere to as well.
That's right. I mean, the good news here is that you can incorporate all of the intricacies of the law into the system. Again, oftentimes easier to do than to do that inside of the head of every single lawyer that you hire. And so the nice thing about having a system encapsulate those rules is that you make sure that the output of the system supports all of the rules, and that ultimately the attorney that's using that output knows that how they're allowed to use the information that's given to them. For instance, a good example, I think, of what you're talking about here is we retrieve medical records, but medical malpractice records or records related to a med mal case would be very different than one related to a slip and fall case. Those rules are built into the system so that you know how you can use the data that comes out of it.
Yeah. And I think even from a cultural perspective, privacy first, cyber first, data governance first, building that into the model versus it being an afterthought, I think is critical, not even just for legal platforms to shop, but any sort of AI platform moving forward. The technology is just a piece of it, in my opinion, and the security end of it can't be an afterthought in today's day and age. That's what's going to give you the competitive edge.
I think that's exactly right. And I think it works in both ways, because I think if we implement the security correctly, we actually have the ability to elevate all of us. We all get better at following laws that we may not even have been aware of because they're built into the system.
Yeah, and that's a great point. And I would imagine, Arsen, that because these efficiencies exist, it allows you to do more research as it relates to casework and be more creative with providing solutions to clients and so forth.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, obviously, we talked a lot about the risks of AI, but there's definitely a lot of benefits. I'll give a couple of examples. You may have a circumstances where you have 70,000 contracts to review to determine data usage rights or other provisions in the agreement. Now, certainly AI is not going to give you the full answer to a lot of the questions you have, but as an initial matter, having the AI system process those contracts and derive the provisions that you need and give you an initial analysis that, of course, as an attorney, you would subsequently review and validate, is very helpful. And a lot of the AI systems not only give you the answer, which again may be incorrect, but they hyperlink sometimes to the specific section or legal source that is derived from, so that attorneys can double check, is this correct? Were there errors? So that's one way in which there's a lot of efficiencies. And I think clients also appreciate law firms and lawyers using AI systems because it ultimately passes down costs to them. Instead of having an attorney at an over $1,000 hourly rate reviewing contract by contract, the AI system may help create some efficiencies for the client and allow certain law firms to take on more matters because of the efficiencies and the cost savings that are shared with the client.
All right. Appreciate both of your insights. Thanks for joining us on Trade Talks. I'm Jill Malandrino, Global Markets Reporter at Nasdaq.
Thank you.